Welcome back to Tales from the Jade Scroll. Today, we're exploring the story of Nüwa, the goddess who created humanity.
Humanity? As in everyone?
That's right.
That's a pretty big project.
It may be the biggest project we've talked about so far.
Bigger than creating the universe?
Okay, maybe the second biggest.
That's what I thought.
Our story begins long after Pangu created the universe. The sky stretched high above the earth, rivers wound through valleys, and forests covered the hills.
So the world was already beautiful.
Very beautiful. Birds filled the air with song, animals wandered through the wilderness, and flowers bloomed across the land.
Sounds like a place I'd want to visit.
It did have one problem, though.
Let me guess. No dragons?
Not this time.
One of these days the answer will be dragons.
I promise. The world was full of life, but there was no one to tell stories, build homes, paint pictures, or look up at the stars and wonder what they were. There were no people. Not a single one. That would make the world feel awfully empty. It did. One morning, Nüwa set out to explore the world. She crossed mountains, followed sparkling rivers, and wandered beneath tall trees whose branches seemed to touch the sky. Was she searching for something? Not at first. She simply enjoyed seeing the world she lived in.
That sounds nice.
But the farther she traveled, the more she noticed the silence. The birds sang and the rivers flowed, yet there was no one she could talk to and no one to share the world with. That sounds lonely. Very lonely. Then Nüwa stopped beside a calm river. As she looked into the clear water, she saw her reflection staring back at her.
And that's when she got an idea?
An idea that would change the world forever.
An idea that would change the world forever?
That's right. Nüwa looked into the river and saw her reflection staring back at her.
We see reflections all the time.
We do now, but imagine seeing one in a world with no mirrors.
Good point. That would be pretty amazing.
The water was so clear that it looked almost like a window. Nüwa watched as the reflection smiled when she smiled and moved when she moved.
Did that give her the idea?
It did. Nüwa thought about how beautiful the world was. The rivers were beautiful, the forests were beautiful, the mountains were beautiful.
But she still had no one to share it with.
Exactly. She wanted companions. She wanted others who could laugh, learn, explore, and tell stories.
So what did she do?
Nüwa knelt beside the river and scooped up a handful of soft yellow clay.
Clay?
Every great project has to start somewhere.
I guess that's true.
Nüwa rolled the clay in her hands. She pinched and shaped it carefully, a little here, a little there.
What was she making?
At first, even the birds didn't know.
The birds were watching?
If I were a bird, I would have been watching.
Fair enough.
Slowly, the shape began to look less like a lump of clay and more like a tiny person. It had a head, 2 arms, and 2 legs.
The first person?
Almost. Nüwa held the little figure in her hands and smiled. Then she placed it gently on the ground beside the river.
And
something extraordinary was about to happen.
And something extraordinary was about to happen?
The little clay figure sat quietly beside the river. For a moment, nothing happened at all.
That's usually how these stories go. You were expecting fireworks? At least a dramatic flash of light.
Not this time. Nüwa leaned closer. The birds perched in the trees leaned closer too. Even the river seemed quieter than before.
Everybody was watching.
Everybody was curious. Then, the little clay figure moved!
It worked!
First, one hand moved, then the other. The tiny figure opened its eyes and looked around in amazement.
Imagine being the first person ever!
That would be quite a first day. The little figure stood up on shaky legs. It took one step, then another, then another.
Kind of like a baby learning to walk.
Exactly. Nüwa smiled as the tiny person explored the riverbank. It looked at the trees, the clouds, and the sparkling water.
Did it say anything?
Probably not right away.
Good. I was worried I'd have to come up with the first conversation.
That would be a lot of pressure. As Nüwa watched, she realized something important. The world didn't feel quite so lonely anymore.
Because she finally had someone to share it with?
That's right. The little person laughed and ran along the riverbank. Nüwa laughed too. Just one person solved the problem? That's exactly what Nüwa began to wonder. Oh, One person isn't very many people. And Nüwa was about to discover that creating one person was much easier than creating many.
One person isn't very many people. That was exactly the problem. Nüwa was happy that the world no longer felt completely empty, but she knew one person couldn't build a whole community, especially if they're the only person around. Conversations would be pretty short.
Hello? Hello? Goodbye.
Exactly. The first person seemed happy exploring the world, but Nüwa wanted there to be others. Friends, families, neighbors.
So she made another person?
She did. Nüwa gathered more clay from the riverbank and carefully shaped a second person, then a third, then a fourth.
She was busy.
Very busy.
How long does it take to make a person out of clay?
Probably longer than making a snowman.
Definitely longer than my art projects.
That's a safe bet.
Day after day, Nüwa worked beside the river. Each new clay figure came to life and joined the others.
So now there were groups of people?
Small groups at first. They explored forests together, followed rivers together, and shared stories beneath the stars. The world must have felt very different. It did. Places that once felt quiet now echoed with laughter and conversation.
Was Nüwa finished?
Not even close.
Really?
Nüwa looked across the world and realized something. The earth was enormous. There were mountains beyond mountains and rivers beyond rivers.
And she was making every person by hand?
One at a time.
Uh-oh.
Nüwa was about to discover that she needed a faster way to fill the world with people.
I just realized something.
What's that?
Nüwa accidentally gave herself the biggest arts and crafts project in history.
That's one way to describe it.
I'm not wrong.
You aren't. Every day she shaped more people from clay, and every day more people came to life.
How many people had she made by now?
More than you could count on your fingers.
That's not saying much.
Fair point. Villages began to appear beside rivers. Families gathered beneath the trees. At night, people sat together and shared stories beneath the stars.
That sounds nice.
It was. The world felt happier than it ever had before.
But Nüwa still had a problem.
A very big one. No matter how fast she worked, the world was simply too large.
Mountains, forests, rivers?
And endless stretches of land beyond them.
She was never going to finish.
One afternoon, Nüwa sat beside the river to rest. Her hands were covered in clay, and dozens of new people were exploring nearby.
Did she come up with a plan?
Not immediately.
That's usually when plans show up.
Sometimes. As she watched the river flow past, she picked up a long vine that had drifted onto the shore.
A vine? That seems random.
It did at first. Nüwa dipped the vine into the muddy clay beside the river and lifted it into the air.
What happened?
Tiny drops of clay flew in every direction.
Oh! I think I know where this is going.
Nüwa was beginning to think she had finally found a faster way.
I have to admit, this vine idea is making me curious.
You're not the only one.
Did Nüwa know it would work?
Probably not. Sometimes the best ideas start as experiments.
That's what I tell people when my ideas don't work.
Convenient. Nüwa dipped the vine into the muddy clay beside the river. Thick drops of clay clung to it as she lifted it into the air.
Then what?
She gave the vine a gentle swing.
That's it?
That's it. Tiny drops of clay flew through the air. Some landed beside the river. Some landed in the grass. Some landed beneath the trees.
That's a lot faster than making people one at a time.
Much faster. At first, the little clay drops sat quietly on the ground.
Here comes the waiting part.
Just a little. Then one clay drop moved. Another moved. Then another.
It worked!
Tiny figures stood up all across the riverbank. They looked around in amazement and began exploring their new world.
So she made lots of people at once.
Hundreds, more than she could have made by hand in the same amount of time.
That's a pretty clever solution.
Nüwa thought so too. Well, actually, she smiled and immediately started swinging the vine again.
No time to waste.
Back and forth went the vine. More clay drops flew through the air, and more people appeared across the land. The world was finally starting to fill up. Villages grew larger, new families appeared. The once quiet world became filled with laughter, stories, and adventure.
Was Nüwa finally finished?
Not quite. We'll continue the story after a short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Across the world!
Everywhere Nüwa looked, she saw people. Some settled beside rivers where fresh water was easy to find. Others built homes near forests filled with fruit and animals.
That makes sense. If I were starting a village, I definitely want water nearby.
A wise decision.
I've watched enough survival shows.
Then you're already ahead of most ancient villagers. As the years passed, people began learning from one another. They shared ideas, taught skills, and worked together to solve problems.
Like what?
How to build stronger shelters, how to cross rivers, how to store food for difficult seasons.
So nobody knew those things at first?
Not at all. Every skill had to be discovered by someone.
Imagine being the first person to figure something out.
Hopefully not by making too many mistakes.
That's usually how learning works.
Villages grew larger. Children played together beside streams, families gathered around evening fires, and stories were shared beneath the stars.
I like that part.
Me too. The world that once felt empty was now filled with laughter.
What was Nüwa doing while all this was happening?
Mostly watching, helping, and making sure people were safe. Whenever someone faced a challenge, she tried to guide them.
That's a lot of responsibility for one person. Especially when that person is responsible for all people. That's a very long to-do list.
It certainly is. But as the years passed, Nüwa began wondering about something she had never considered before.
What was it?
What would happen to humanity if she couldn't watch over them forever?
What would happen if Nüwa couldn't watch over humanity forever?
The more she thought about it, the more important the question became. Humanity was thriving. Villages were growing, families were forming, and people were learning new things every day.
Which sounds like good news.
It was, but success brought new challenges.
Like what?
The world was becoming far bigger and busier than when Nüwa had first shaped that tiny clay figure beside the river.
That's kind of amazing to think about.
What do you mean?
Well, imagine making one person from clay, then a few more, then a village, then suddenly there are people all over the world.
That's exactly what happened.
I'd probably spend a week just staring in surprise.
Nüwa may have felt the same way. One evening, she returned to the river where the story had begun. The water flowed gently past, just as it had on the day she created the first person.
The whole story came full circle.
It did. As Nüwa sat beside the river, she watched families walking home together. Children laughed and chased one another along the riverbank.
The world sounds a lot less lonely now.
Much less lonely. In fact, the problem wasn't loneliness anymore.
Then what was the problem?
Responsibility. Nüwa had helped humanity grow, but she couldn't be everywhere at once. She couldn't guide every village, answer every question, or create every future person herself.
That's a lot for anyone.
Even for a goddess. As the river flowed past, Nüwa began thinking about the future. Not next week, not next year.
How far ahead?
Generations ahead. What would happen hundreds of years from now? Thousands of years from now? How could humanity continue to grow if it always depended on her?
That's a really big question.
And before the sun set that evening, Nüwa would begin searching for an answer.
So Nüwa started searching for an answer?
She did. For days, she watched the people she had created. She watched them work, learn, and help one another.
Looking for a clue?
Exactly. One morning, Nüwa sat on a hillside overlooking a village. Below her, people were beginning their day. Some were gathering food, others were repairing homes. Children ran through the village, laughing and playing.
That sounds peaceful.
It was, but something else caught Nüwa's attention. What was it? She noticed how people cared for one another. Parents taught their children. Older villagers shared their knowledge with younger ones. Friends worked together to solve problems.
Nobody was doing everything alone anymore.
That's right. People were helping each other grow.
Was that the clue?
It was the beginning of one. Nüwa realized that humanity's greatest strength wasn't how fast people could run or how strong they were.
Then what was it?
Their ability to care for one another and pass things on. Skills, stories, knowledge, life itself. That's actually a pretty powerful idea.
As she watched the village, an idea finally began to take shape. Humanity didn't need her to create every future person by hand, because people could build the future themselves. Exactly. If families could grow and new generations could follow, humanity could continue long after Nüwa stepped back. So the future wouldn't depend on just one person anymore? For the first time, Nüwa could imagine a future where humanity continued growing on its own. That's a pretty incredible gift. And Nüwa was about to put that idea into action.
So Nüwa finally had an answer?
She did. But before she acted on it, she spent time watching the people she had created.
Making sure she was right?
Exactly. This was a decision that would affect humanity forever. Nüwa walked from village to village. Everywhere she went, she saw people helping one another. Parents taught their children, friends worked together. Elders shared stories beside evening fires.
The stories again.
The stories again. Every time a story was shared, knowledge traveled from one person to another.
Kind of like passing a torch.
That's a beautiful way to describe it. Nüwa realized that people were already doing something remarkable. They weren't just surviving. They were teaching, learning, and building on what came before.
So each generation could help the next one go a little farther.
Exactly. A child learned from a parent. Then that child grew up and taught another child. Skills were passed on. Stories were passed on. Wisdom was passed on.
And it could keep going forever?
That's what Nüwa realized. She imagined years passing, then centuries, then thousands of years. Villages becoming towns, towns becoming great cities. New discoveries being made, new stories being told.
That's a lot of future.
Humanity was just getting started.
I wonder if Nüwa could have imagined everything people would eventually accomplish.
Probably not. And that's what made it so special. The future no longer depended on one goddess. It depended on millions of people helping one another and carrying what they learned into the future.
That's a pretty amazing gift.
It really is. And with that realization, Nüwa knew her greatest work was finally complete.
So Nüwa's greatest work was finally complete?
It was. The lonely world she had once walked through had become something completely different.
Villages, families, stories.
And people helping one another. Everywhere Nüwa looked, she saw signs that humanity was growing and learning on its own.
That's gotta feel pretty rewarding.
Imagine spending so much time helping something grow and then watching it succeed.
I'd be proud.
Nüwa was too. She visited the rivers where children played. She walked through forests where travelers shared stories. She watched villages come alive with laughter, music, and friendship.
The world wasn't lonely anymore.
Not even a little. Humanity would continue exploring, learning, and building long into the future. New stories would be told, new discoveries would be made, new generations would carry the world forward. All because one goddess decided the world needed someone to share it with? That's one way to look at it.
So what's the lesson of the story?
That some of the greatest gifts aren't things at all. They're opportunities.
Opportunities?
The opportunity to learn, to grow, to help others, to pass on what we know.
Just like the people in the story.
Exactly. Nüwa created humanity, but humanity's future was built by people working together, generation after generation.
I like that lesson.
Me too. Thanks for listening to Tales from the Jade Scroll.
We'll be back soon with another myth from ancient China.
Until then, keep wondering.
And keep learning.